Hi, I'm Chris. I'm the founder of Foxley Consulting. We're commercial experts and we're passionate about influence and decision making, understanding how people make decisions and how you can influence those decisions. We want to share that passion and that knowledge with everybody, not just a chosen few. In the last few weeks, there's been some news stories about brands and organisations that have made decisions that are not purely driven by profits. I found this refreshing and inspiring, and it started to get me reflecting on how would you measure success if it wasn't purely by profits? When you think about only one objective, it actually becomes quite limiting because there are few options and alternatives. Success is defined only by the profits that you might achieve and not by anything else. And it means that as you get into conflict situations about how much money you're going to make, there's no way to work around them. You're simply going to head. If you think about more options and more alternatives, then it creates options and flexibilities and other ways that you can demonstrate success. If you think about it in this context, profits is actually very limiting for business because every year you have to exceed the profits from the previous year. The problem is that there's always another year, which means that you're always having to grow profits. And it means that you're forever on this hamster wheel of accelerating pressure to continue to grow more and more and more in the face of competitors who are more innovative, more aggressive, and prepared to undercut your prices. It leads to frustration, to damage, and to greed defining your decision making. Most businesses are dictated by their shareholders. It's their demand for dividend and for profits that drives the company's decision making. But what's interesting is that there will always be more shareholders. If your company is a success, there will always be people prepared to buy and invest in that company. Now, the most important people in any business are in fact the customers. Because without customers, there are no businesses at all. You rely on them to demonstrate loyalty and commitment to buy products and to buy services. And customers are becoming increasingly frustrated by a corporate world that is purely profiteering. The high-profile cases of people protesting against companies who engage in tax avoidance schemes is a good example of this. And therefore, as an organization, if you embrace the idea that the world is a bigger place and that there are other ways to measure success, then it's likely that you're going to attract customers who share those values and who share those views. And it creates loyalty and a different perspective on the brand and the company that you are representing. Let me talk about the three examples then that inspired me to make this video. The first one is that on Saturday night, Tyson Fury fought in an epic World Heavyweight Championship boxing match. It goes down in history as one of the greatest fights of all time, and people talk about it reinvigorating the heavyweight division. Now, Tyson Fury is a deeply unpopular character. He has suffered from depression and mental illness. He's been involved in drug use, but he's also made very offensive statements in public in the past and has become deeply unpopular as a result of that. It is reported that as a result of his fight on Saturday night, he's made about $8 million. And since the fight, he's come out and said that he's going to donate that money to charities and particularly to homeless charities. And the reason for that is that he says, well, I can't take the money with me when I die. I need to teach my children that if they're going to value anything, they need to work for it. And also, he said, I'm aware that there are other people in the world who need this much more than me. This decision indicates that Tyson Fury is not a man who is dictated to simply by money. He has got more value to him than that. And whether you love him or hate him, it adds a new dimension to his decision making. Here's a guy who is not simply greedy, taking the money and running away. He has been prepared to give that money to people who he believes are more deserving than he is. And it will change people's perspective on him. Now, there's no doubt that he'll get a rematch for this fight, and no doubt he'll get sponsorship and other opportunities for earning. But many other people in his position would have taken this money and that money. It's an interesting choice. The second example is Taylor Swift has recently signed a record deal worth approximately $100 million to her. Now, what's unusual about this is that she's taken her time to get to this deal. In fact, she's demonstrated loyalty to the record company that signed her when she was much younger. Now, this is unusual because in this industry, when artists become successful, they get tempted away by the big bucks to go to big labels. But Taylor Swift has demonstrated that loyalty. Now, she has signed with this big record label. She's built a base of power that she's been able to use to her advantage, and she really has done so. First of all, she's broken record company rules. She now owns the masters to her own music. Now, what that means is that she has got much greater control about how her music is used and what happens to it in the future. But she's gone further than that. Taylor Swift has been a vocal critic of how artists don't receive fair value for their music sold through streaming services. And she's built into her contract with the record company the facility which means that all the artists on that label will benefit more from the success of streaming services. It's not a purely selfish decision that makes her benefit, but it's a greater benefit for artists who she believes need to be better respected for their craft. And yet again, she's demonstrated here that it's not simply about herself. Whatever you think about Taylor Swift and her decision making, here's an example of someone who is using the power that she's accumulated to influence on behalf of people who don't have that same power. And the final example that comes to mind is the recent presentation by Patagonia of their profits. They've had a very good and very successful year, but they've been honest about the success and suggested that $10 million of that success is as a result of the tax reforms that have been implemented in the United States. They believe that they don't deserve that money, that that was money that was handed to them. And as a result, they've decided to give that money away to climate change charities. Again, a decision which is driven not by greed, not by profiteering, but by thinking about the world that we're operating in, who their customers are, what their customers are likely to care about, and recognizing and reflecting those values in their customers. There is no doubt that each one of these deals is a great deal for the brand and the personality involved. They have been very successful. But what it demonstrates is that they've got a bigger view of what success looks like, about how they measure their own success and how they support society in bigger terms. We've evolved from a time where the strong were responsible for hunting and gathering food. The creative people, they were the people responsible for building and architecture, schools and churches. And the caring in our society, they took care of the young and the sick. We live in a time where it seems that only the strong, gathering more and more to themselves, are the ones that are being victorious. If you as a company or a brand start to think about the world that you're in, and you start to think about the responsibilities that you have for others in society, then it could be a really strong strategic move. You could start to attract people who share your values, who build loyalty with you because they also want to create some common good. Look at companies such as Tom's as an example of somebody who has been successful, and they have done so because they've well publicized that what they do is not just for their own benefit, but what they do for people who are less fortunate. At Foxley Consulting, I'm really proud to be a guide dog volunteer. And what that means is that I'm a puppy walker. I take care of a guide dog puppy for the first year of its life and train it before it goes off to its trainer to graduate as a guide dog. That takes a lot of time to look after a puppy, and a lot of energy and a lot of effort. But I could be spending that time investing in the business. My point is that that will not give me the satisfaction that I get through doing something for other people. So start to think about what you are contributing. How are you measuring success? Don't be fooled. Success is not purely based upon how much money you make. If you set out to measure success in different ways, in the way that you contribute to others, in the way that you commit to the values of society, or the way that you operate with your employees and your customers, then that will define success for you. Think about it, set them as clear goals, and then you can start to build your commercial strategy in the way that will define success for you in the long term and be sustainable.